You're listening to the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast with your host, Cameron Manning. We bring you the industry experts each episode who will help you man up on your real estate career. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. I'm glad to have you back listening in here. And we have another awesome speaker lined up for you here today. I'm really excited because I've been getting to know this guy for several months now. I recognize his voice anywhere, and we'll kind of dive into why that's the case later on. But he's a luxury and investment specialist out of Engels and Volkers in Atlanta, Georgia. He's got a background in sales and marketing, which we're going to touch on a little bit. I'm really excited to have him here. I consider him a good friend of mine now. We chat almost weekly. Welcome to the podcast, Matt Lamarsh.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. And I could not agree. I mean, you nailed it. That was perfect. I feel like you covered all of it, honestly. And I don't know if it's the only thing I'll hold you to is maybe daily versus weekly now, because I feel like, Clubhouse has really ruined us for like daily connection, but I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
100%. If you ever need me to record like an introduction for you for one of your YouTube videos, just let me know. I'm good for it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Checks in the mail.
There we go. I appreciate it. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Like I said, we've been chatting a lot, and I think that you provide a lot of value to a lot of people, both investors and entrepreneurs and realtors. So I just wanted to, take that conversation, expand it a little bit. We chat a lot, but there's a broader audience that's not necessarily on the Clubhouse app that we're on. But before we really dive into that, I always like for people to get to know who you are and what brought you into real estate. I know you've been doing it for a little over 3 years now, right?
Right at 3 years. Yeah, exactly.
Right at 3 years. Yeah. So what tell us about your background, what you were doing before, and what led you to get into real estate itself?
Yeah, I started out, in a very entrepreneurial family. Neither one of my parents were entrepreneurs, but both my grandfathers were. And so I grew up in that world where, my dad worked for my grandfather. So there were weekends that I'd be at the warehouse helping him load a truck or, move materials around the warehouse and stuff. And so just from a very young age, it was always really interesting to me that grandpa owns this place. Like that was just a very, different way of growing up. And I think if you're close enough to entrepreneurship when you're young, it starts to like kind of appeal to you because you feel the control and the freedom that comes along with it, but you don't always see the work and the grind and the hustle sometimes that it takes. So, growing up from a very young age, I understood that like, I would call us like upper middle class, maybe growing up. We never really wanted for anything, but at the same time, luxury or abundance was never truly the case. And so, I started mowing lawns and lemonade stands and everything I could do to make some money as a teenager prior to even working age. And then once I got to, 15, 16 years old, I ran out and got a job during middle school and high school and just started loving making money. It was fun to me. Like that was, most kids were out playing sports and stuff, which I did some of, but honestly, for me, I always liked business. I liked that kind of like connection to it. And I saw my dad was a huge, and still is, a very huge role model for me, and the sacrifice that he put, forth to financially support 4 kids and a wife. And so, I always kind of put that on a pedestal. Again, not just my grandfathers, but even my mom and dad were very, very inspirational in that regard. But always worked 2 or 3 jobs, even through middle school, high school, and college. And in fact, I got to college age. I was in my junior year, the first semester. And I actually had an economics professor talk me out of school. He was talking about opportunity cost. And he's like, you have a choice. You can be here, you can be learning, you can get your degree, you can go out and hopefully get a good job that pays great money. And, or you can go out and make money now and, discover different opportunities, and you have a choice basically. Right. And I'll never forget, I walked up to him after that lecture, I shook his hand and I said, I think you just changed my life. And I'm sure he probably thought, oh boy, what did I do? What did I say? But it honestly was a very pivotal moment for me to go, this guy's right. Like I do have a choice. We do have choices in life. And so, now 20 years later, basically, to be sitting here and talking to you about entrepreneurship and small business and real estate and everything that we're going to dig into is just really, really exciting. But my entrepreneurial journey has not been super glamorous. My first business I started on my own was actually as a dovetail to another job, quote unquote, that I had. And I sold stuff for people on eBay.
Nice.
So I ran Yeah, I think I ran three, retail brick and mortar stores here in Atlanta where you would bring your stuff in and I would sell it for you. And if it's on eBay, I've probably sold it because we did thousands of transactions every week, including cars and land and
Yep.
watch, Rolex watch. I mean, again, anything you can imagine. And so those three locations shut down because of just a disagreement with partners.
Right.
And I ultimately saw an opportunity to create something of my own. There was nothing proprietary about what they were doing, and so I was like, I can do this. I don't need the space, and I've got enough good connections in this world now that I can actually go out and get stuff to sell. So I really built a niche around small businesses and selling their old computers and office equipment and
Right.
cubicles and whatever.
Whatever you get your hands on and they need to
Anything and
get rid of.
everything. Yep. And then even nonprofits that would do toy drives and stuff that we could turn around and sell those toys to raise money, for the nonprofits and stuff. So
Right.
it's pretty simple. It sold for $100. I would take 35 or $40 and then they would get the rest. And then,
Right.
when you're doing $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 in sales every year, it starts to add up.
Not
But
bad.
I got punched in the mouth pretty hard when the market turned in 08, 09,
Right.
and that business basically just vaporized. No one would return my phone calls. No one had anything else to
People were
sell.
panicking. They weren't trying to buy stuff. They weren't buying junk on eBay. And yeah,
Freaking out, man.
yeah,
I mean, it was not just in real estate, right? Like it was
yeah,
everything.
everywhere, everything.
So got punched in the face. That business vaporized overnight. And then I went back into corporate America for about 15 years and then started a lawn care and landscaping business about 6 years ago. Sold it 3 years ago and have now been in real estate for about 3 years. And fortunately for me, the lawn care and landscaping thing was a chance for me to like dust myself off, get back up, try again.
Yeah.
And the inspirational piece behind that was I lost both of my grandfathers in the 2 years prior. And I was like, this life is too short. I don't want to work for people I don't like. I don't want to do something I don't like. I'm going to go find something and create something for myself. And so
That's awesome.
that's kind of where we went.
And it's interesting too. So I mean, there's one connection that I find when I talk to a lot of people that are very entrepreneurial, that are building businesses. They all had some like little business that they started as a kid, whether it's doing the lemonade stand, like you said, or you were mowing lawns. For me, I was going door to door trying to sell crab apples because I saw that we had crab apples in our yard, and I bag them up and go to my neighbors, right? So it's interesting. Like everyone does that, and I absolutely think that that's a good sign. And I think listeners, if you have kids and you're seeing them want to do something like that, go out and encourage it, because that could be what spurs them on to be an entrepreneur, right? And start something for
100%.
themselves. And it's interesting that you were mowing lawns as a kid, and then you came back around and then created a company about mowing lawns. But
there's something really nice about it though. Like you pop your AirPods in, you're mowing grass for 8 hours, and I liked being outside already, so that was an easy fit. Obviously, the summers here in Atlanta, Georgia, are really, really hot. And after 3 or 4 years, it takes its toll on the body. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and you spend 30 minutes or an hour on someone's lawn and it looks amazing, right?
Mhm.
And that instant impact, that instant gratification, it was really nice. But it also taught me the long tail version of that, right? To build a business, to keep something sustainable and consistent for a long time. That's a challenge. And so then to balance those two is really cool. But yeah, you're exactly right. My daughter is super entrepreneurial, and if I could get her a permit for a lemonade stand every day, she would be out there like doing her homework, waiting for someone to come by so that she could sell them some lemonade. But
yeah. It's funny. I watch a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk, right? I don't know if you watch his content, but he's been doing that trash talk series where he's going garage selling, buying stuff, flipping it on eBay. So you kind of reminded me when you were saying you were doing that. But what I really like too is that he talks about how he had the lemonade stand when he was a kid. So every time he sees a kid at a garage sale with a lemonade stand, even if it's $1, he's giving them like a $20 bill. And like, he's like, I got to respect the hustle where I started. Right. And I think that's, again, you got to encourage that. I think too many people are nervous about stuff like that. And then they just kind of, go play with your friends or something. But no, if we have a kid, like, I mean, my mom's like, yeah, hey, take the wagon, fill up your wagon with bags and come back, see what happens. For me, the business only lasted 2 days because I realized that everyone in my neighborhood also had crab apples. So, I was like, okay, supply and demand, great.
Supply and demand, right.
There. I'm like, wow, everyone has it, so I'm not going to make any money. I think I sold 2 bags out of pity. Because some neighbors like, I'll support the kid, here's $5, right? But it happens. So no, I think that that's a common thing I'm seeing a lot when I'm interviewing people. Is we all had that entrepreneurial drive. We wanted to do stuff, and you're getting working young. I my first job after that, I was 13 years old as a soccer ref. I found out that instead of playing, I could make money at soccer. So I started doing that, right? So there's all these things. I see a common thread. Now, real estate, I want to kind of like dive a little bit more. So you built your business, your lawn mowing business, and you just sold that. So that's an incredible feat that you're able to build a business and sell it. That's kind of the entrepreneurial goal, right? Build a business and
Sure.
eventually sell it. And now you've gone into real estate. What was the attraction for you into real estate? Why was that the next phase?
Yeah. Yeah. So we gotta go back about 14 years. When we got married, my wife was actually a buyer's agent on a KW team here in Atlanta.
Okay.
And so, seeing her in business and the possibilities that kind of came within that business and the opportunities she was given, I was just like, I know there's something there for me. But this was, again, we got married in '07. So '07, '08, her broker, I flat out asked him, I was like, I'm thinking about getting my license. He was like, don't do that. Don't do that. He could kind of see the writing on the wall and what was coming in the couple of years ahead. But that actually kind of started it for me. So watching her in the business, and my wife and I are very, very similar when it comes to like our common core stuff that we both think about and agree, and the work ethic and everything there, but
Mhm,
we're very different people. And in fact,
right.
that's why our marriage works, right? She's the
Mhm.
opposite of what I am.
The yin
And
to your
so
yang.
exactly, 100%. And so that kind of gave me a taste of it. And seeing my partner in that business was like, okay, could I do that? Like, could I be a part of that? And so then about 10 years ago, we bought our house here in Sandy Springs and started renting that property. And so then the idea of investment came in, and it was like, oh, okay, so there's a whole nother world here around real estate that I don't even have to get my license. I could just be an investor, right?
Yeah.
And potentially just do it that way. And so, there was always that interest. And of course, over the last 10 years, as we've seen a lot of tenants come and go and managing that property ourselves, um, it was just very interesting. And it always kind of kept my mind that there's a lot of different things that you can do within real estate. And so
Yeah.
you don't have to just be a licensee. You don't just have to be a broker. Like there's a lot of different things that you can do within it. And so, a couple of years ago, when I got into the position to start positioning the business my lawn care business for sale, I was like, what am I going to do next? Like, where do we go from here? Right.
Yeah.
And so, fortunately for me, we had done a really good job of building the business like a 5 mile radius and then getting it down to 2 miles and then down to 1 mile. So everyone within a 1 mile radius of my house pretty much has seen my name at some point. Right.
Mhm.
And I thought, what would be a good segue into a service related business, but that I can get more dollars per hour, that I can be the trusted advisor, that if you trust me with cutting your grass, that's one thing. But with
Yeah.
your largest asset, that's a whole nother thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and a couple $100 a month versus, tens of thousands in commissions. Our average price here in Sandy Springs is about $700,000. So you can do the math and figure out what
Oh
the
yeah.
average sale might net an agent. But I always had an interest in real estate. So it was like, what do I do with it? Do I get my license? Do I just stay an investor? And ultimately I decided, I go and get my license in November, and then in December actually take the test and pass, and then started in January of 2019 and still had my business at that time. So there was about a 90-day overlap where I was positioning the business to get it ready for sale, to build up the dollars, per hour, basically to build up the route density that I had built and really fine tune things to put it in the best light possible, and then start marketing it. And so and actually I started the year not even thinking I was going to sell the business. I
Right.
just thought, well, I've got a great guy running it right now. Maybe he'll just stay on. Middle of February hit, and he came to me and he was like, yeah, so the end of March, I'm out. And I was
Oh
like,
shit.
uh-oh, we got to make a change here. So in the middle of February, started positioning it for, really fine tuning everything and getting it ready for sale and talking to business brokers and everything else.
Yeah.
But honestly, Cam, like, as much as I enjoyed those conversations with business brokers and really high level discussions about profitability and what your
Yeah.
P&L look like, I listed the thing on Craigslist, and 30 days later, I sold it to a guy that had business on either side of me, geographically speaking.
Right.
And he had a massive void that I could fill with my business. And he
Right.
wrote me a check about 20 days later. So,
Beauty.
so yeah, man, it was an interesting journey, but it taught me a lot and positioned me and prepared me for real estate, because now everyone, again, in a mile radius now knows me
Yeah.
and recognizes the name, and knows that I built a really, really great business.
Mhm.
And that helped prepare me and predict a lot of the success that we were going to have early on in real estate.
Absolutely. And I mean, in a lot of ways too, you've already built that clientele. So, I mean, you just go to that. So, you've got the database built now from your previous business. And there's not a big overlap because it's not like you're competing against the guy you sold it to. Because even if you sell that property, those people might need, lawn services. So, you can actually, in a way, probably partner with that guy and say, hey, he's now my go to lawn service guy or whatever the case might be. So, there's a
Mhm.
lot of things that you can operate and still you've built that reputation. So, I think that's
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to talk a little bit about the investing side because this podcast originally started on the investor side. You know that investing is my core, business, right? The investment real estate. And so one thing that I realized early on that was as a key game changer is that the agents out there, there's not a ton that truly understand investment real estate. So it's a way that I found that if I got my license, I can stand out amongst the crowd because I built a portfolio. I'd done several different strategies from flipping to owning rentals to rent owns and things like that. So, being that you were starting to invest in real estate, starting to build a portfolio, what did you do from that aspect? As you got your license, do you now go out and I know you work with investors? Are you more on the education side? How do you take that knowledge and implement it into your new business?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot, I mean, you know this about me, but for those of you that don't know me, I use social media a lot, right?
Mhm.
And education, entertainment, like it's all the same. It's just how you go about doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think education is a big part of it for sure, because I think a lot of people have this notion that, well, you got to have $1 million in the bank to invest, or you got to
Yeah.
have, a $200,000 a year income to really be able to, become a real estate investor. That's not the case at all.
True. Yeah.
Right. And we're prime examples of that. Our first home is our rental home. Like the house that we lived in is the house that we now rent. And so that's one opportunity. Of course, house hacking's out there, but for me it was just changing the narrative, right? And I think that a lot of agents really underestimate the power of, the think tank that is Clubhouse, the think tank
Yes.
that is our industry. And we kind of get into this echo chamber of, well, this is what a typical investor looks like. That has radically changed. 2021, folks. Like
Yeah.
it's very, very different, right? Your
Yeah.
old school investor that bought a multifamily or a single family residence and then bought another one the next year and another one the next, and now has $5 million in real estate. Like he started out the same way you did, right? He
Yeah.
started out one at a time. Very, very few people get into real estate investing buying, multiple properties within a
True.
year,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, I use the education component of it, but also just the financial piece, because a lot of people, the economy here in the Atlanta area, but certainly in the United States, has been so good for so long that
Mhm.
you have a lot of people that are doing really, really well right now, and they have
Yeah.
the opportunity to invest and place money in places that they maybe didn't before. But they're also looking to diversify. And so, me as an investor, I can speak to that perfectly, right? Like, and I've always questioned it, and no judgment, by the way, but like if you are a real estate agent that lives in an apartment, you should really think about your messaging, right? Like,
Mhm.
why don't you have a house? Why don't you have a place that you're paying a mortgage on? And again, no judgment here,
Yep.
but it's a
Yep.
very simple, and a lot of people might say bold statement, but me as an investor, I understand the mindset and I
Yep.
understand the good, the bad, and the ugly that kind of come along with it. So
Yeah.
I always challenge people on that, mentality and how you position things, because that's ultimately what people speak to and what resonates with them.
And I think the powerful thing too with someone like yourself who understands that aspect is that every single client that you have now can become an investor because it's that education aspect, right? When I'm dealing with a first time home buyer, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, whatever, I start talking investment to them. Like as I'm showing them houses, not just how beautiful it is and living your dream. It's how can we utilize this property to buy you more later, right? Whether it's you upsizing, keeping it as a rental, or you tapping into that equity to buy something else. You get that frame of mind because I don't know about you, but my opinion is like most people's pensions are never going to actually help them out because we're living longer, all this stuff. So I want to teach my clients that the pension should also be in at least one or two extra properties. You don't have to be a full-time investor that's flipping properties every year, but even if you buy your principal residence and one or two other properties that you sit on for the next 20 years as your retirement properties, letting someone else pay them off, you're in a much better position. So again, it goes back to that education. I like that you said that, because I feel like every single client, if you get that in your mind and you think that way, you become that person that's an educator, not just facilitating a real estate deal, right?
Yeah. Well, even as a buyer, you are an investor, right? Like you're
You're investing in
investing in
yourself.
your primary residence.
Yep.
Like that's a move.
Mhm.
And yeah, you're exactly right. I think a lot of people now, I mean, especially with the stock market and the inflation, issues that we've had here in the United States have been crazy. So
Yeah.
people are naturally looking at crypto and a million other things, but
Yeah.
people that never considered real estate are now considering it because it is one of those. And honestly, especially when you're our age in your 20s or 30s, when you think about retiring when you're 50 or 55 or 60, like when you've got 20 years on your side, even if you break even every
Yeah.
year on that house, the appreciation alone is going to make you money, right? To
Yep.
pay for kids' college or to fund your retirement or your hobbies or whatever you want to do when you're 50, 55, or 60.
Yeah.
That's a really, really, really good point.
I mean, I even look at it this way. Like, I like that you said the break even aspect. And even let's say hypothetically over 20 years between ups and downs and market crashes and market gains, you don't even get that appreciation. But let's say you said your average property is $700,000. Let's say you put 20% down, or I don't know what your guys' structure is there, but ours is 20% for investment properties. You're still looking at a mortgage of like, close to $600,000 over 20 years. You're creating $600,000 in somebody else paying that mortgage down. So at the bare minimum, you're getting that aspect. And even then, in our current interest rate cycle with a 20% down payment, that's about a 10% per annum return, right? Which, I don't know a lot of stocks and mutual funds that still produce that. And that's just one aspect of the investment, right? Then again, you mix in market growth. We all know that that's likely going to happen. So, I mean, we mix that in. You've got printing of money right now causing inflation. Real estate's one of the only ways that you can hedge against that inflation, because as the dollar devalues, your property value is going up. So now you mix that in our area, we're looking at about a 15% with a very minimal 3% growth. Well, that's how I calculated. I'm very conservative. That's still a 15% return on investment. So now, even if you're break even, you're just covering all the expenses, you're at a 25% per year return on your money. So, I mean, to me, it's a no brainer. And if we can teach people that's where we become a very valuable asset to them as an advisor.
100%. And so let's bring this thing full circle to, I mentioned opportunity costs, right? Not only is it about the money and the time that we have on our side, especially in our 20s and 30s as investors, but even into your 40s and 50s,
Mhm.
like you probably have made some decent income. You
Yep.
probably have some decent assets already. And so just if you're looking to diversify, you're given that opportunity. But back to the opportunity cost component, and especially when you're super conservative like you and I are, right? Like even if you're half wrong on all of this stuff financially, what else does this do for you? This gives you the
Yeah.
opportunity to make other decisions, other moves. Because
Yeah.
when you own a home for 5 or 10 years and you make, $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million, it doesn't pick a number.
Cheers.
You can
Yeah.
go do things with that money that don't look like real estate, because we don't know where all this stuff is headed. And especially with crypto, with something that you can't touch and feel, you can go touch and feel that house. You can
Yes,
go touch and feel.
absolutely. It's tangible.
Now, I'm not knocking crypto or blockchain or any of that, but like there is something to be said for a tangible asset, right?
100%. Yeah.
And no one can ever take that away from you. So
No,
really
I
important.
I agree. It's funny. I've got all these young guys in my office, and I considered myself a young guy until I start talking to them, and and I'll still jump on TikTok, but I mean, I finally bought some crypto a few months ago, and I'm like watching this go whoop, whoop. I'm like, so I don't get it, right? Like to me, it just doesn't make sense. But I'm like, whatever. I put some money in there. If I lose it, I'm okay. I didn't like spend my fortune on it. And then I turned around and bought 4 more properties this year, right? Because I'm like, I understand it. It's very simple to understand real estate, in my opinion. And if you just have the right strategies, buy the right areas, and have the right advisors, you can do well, right? I mean, you have to have multiple exit strategies. You need to be able to buy in an area that's liquid. I've made my mistakes over the years. As a full-time investor, I bought properties that have cost me. It happens, but that's where I've become an even stronger investor. So, I appreciate everything that you said on that regards. Now, I do want to dive into social media a little bit, because I do see you are building a great brand on social media. I mean, I obviously follow your stuff, but then I do want to segue into Clubhouse after for sure, because it's been a major thing that we've gotten to know each other. So real social media, why do you need to be, as an entrepreneur, not even just as a realtor, just in general, if you're in business and trying to do something for yourself, why do you need to be on social media in your opinion?
Yeah. So it's interesting for me. My breakout moment was in Snapchat, right? Where I was running my lawn care and landscaping business. And that's why I love you so much.
You're
Because
basically telling my story too.
exactly, right? CC. So yeah, for me it was using a geotag on a snap, and I'll never forget this. Like you earlier, we talked about these moments in time, right? Like these are things that I will tell my kids, my grandkids, and my great grandkids about, because technology is moving that way, right?
Yeah.
And it's moving there faster than most people are comfortable with, which is a huge vulnerability. But anyway, I digress. On Snapchat, I used a geotag filter
Yeah.
to, locate where I was at the time and the job that we were working on and so on and so forth. It created a conversation in my business for a new client that we got an $8,000 job out of. So, whether it's an $8,000 job that you're doing lawn care and landscaping for, whether it's a new buyer or seller or investor in real estate, like people want to do business with people that they see their faces, that
Yeah.
they hear their voices. Like that's why social media works. And so
Yeah.
one of our friends on Clubhouse mentioned it this way, and I thought, I've never thought about it that way, but it's conversations and connections at
Mhm.
scale, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
I don't know how many people watch your story, but every day, a couple hundred people tap
Hmm.
into Matt Lamarsh's Instagram story and go,
Yep.
what's Matt up to today, right?
100%.
If I were standing in front of those 200 or 300 people, it'd be like crazy, right? Like, that's a crazy thought.
You would
But
think so. Yeah.
that's how I think about social media. It's
Yeah.
what would I say to these people? They're coming here, they want to listen. And even though the medium is different, even though it's social media where it's super easy just to tap right through, or if it's in person, what would I say to
Yeah.
that group of people? And so that's really why I think about social media very, very differently than I think a lot of people do. And even 2 years before I got into this business, I followed every single real estate agent in Atlanta on
Yeah.
Instagram and Facebook. And I was like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And no one was doing what I'm doing now, but also no one was doing it differently that would make me jump out and use them, right?
Yeah.
Would actually get me to pick up the phone and go, Cam, exactly what you were talking about today in your story
Yeah.
or in that video or in that post. I need to buy an investment property or to buy my first. None of that.
Yeah.
No call to action, no relationship building, no conversation creators. It was, here's my just listed, here's
Yeah.
my just sold, here's my under contract, here's a picture of
Yeah.
me and my clients at closing, which to me was like the most powerful, because I'm like, someone else other than you.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it gave me great context for how I should do social media. And
Yeah.
so, I try to use like 3 or 4 buckets to try to qualify people, right?
Yeah.
So I want to be known as Matt Lamarsh, Atlanta real estate agent, or Atlanta realtor, if you're in the code of ethics and National Association of Realtors. And then Porsche. And
Yeah.
Porsche is a super easy one because it's what I'm passionate about. Like, ask
100%.
me about Porsches and you hear my voice change a little bit.
I can already, just in that moment, you could hear you spurt up. You're like, Porsche. Like,
Right.
I mean, as you guys are listening to this, we're going to have little video clips that we put on our social media. He's wearing a Porsche hat right now. So if you're just listening to, check out those clips afterwards. Cause yeah, I mean, I know that because you've had Porsche talks on Clubhouse. I see it all the time on your Instagram. But what I like about that is that you're showing your passion on Instagram as well. It's not just about selling homes. You really have a passion for Porsches. I can see the picture in the background. I can see the car, the die-cast car in the background there, right? Like I can see it. And you're showing people what your hobbies are and what your likes are, because you're creating that know, like, and trust factor.
Right.
Right. And so if someone else likes Porsche, they're gonna be like, man, I bet if we go look for homes with this guy, he and I are going to have some great conversations about Porsches. In fact, I can show him my Porsche and he can show me his Porsche and all that stuff. Right.
Absolutely.
So it's absolutely bring that character in.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, I mean, again, when you hear that change in my voice, like I oftentimes tell people, especially that come through that bucket, if you will, I'm like, look, I love talking about cars and stuff, but if we're going to focus on buying a house or selling a house, we need to focus on this, right? And this is a disclaimer for me, not you, by the way. So like, stop me when you're ready, you know. But no, it's definitely led to some transactions and to some business being conducted at the same time, like-minded individuals, right? Like we all get into the same stuff. It's easy. And honestly, for me, like I feel almost like this pressure that is if they come as a result of that, I actually have to perform at a higher level because there's just a different thing to it. I feel like if you came through my website, cool, no problem. But like if I know we've got a common passion, now I feel like there's some elevation to the energy and the passion and everything else that comes along with it. And also I know that people are like you know, your friends and colleagues and whatever, like they're probably into a lot of the same stuff you are. So, so anyway, Atlanta real estate agent, Matt Lamarsh, and Portia, like those are the three things. And there's other things that we can go tangents on, but like those are the 3 or 4 things that I like to be known as.
Yeah, no, and I love the fact that you said, the Snapchat thing too. I mean, I remember, almost 5.5 years ago when I was like, you know what, I got to really get on social media. It was still a new concept then in a lot of ways. We had the social media, but people weren't really on Instagram for business yet, and I'm like, I had a coach and he's like, I saw him doing Snapchat like crazy. And so I go on it. And the first thing I get told is no one's going to watch your stuff because it's for kids. Then when I went on Instagram, no one's going to watch that stuff because it's for kids. Now, the most recent one that I know you and I are both on, TikTok, no one's going to watch your stuff because it's for kids. I've been told that the entire time. And yet then they're all running to it afterwards, right? So I think you and I are the same. We recognize that change is inevitable. And we need to be willing to change our marketing strategies on social media based on the current trends, because we don't know when one's going to go away. One of my coaches always says that when you're building a brand on social media, you're building your brand on rented land, right? So, we aren't in control. Already, Instagram has made tons of changes here. Some I like, some I don't. And I'm like, I just have to deal with it, right? So, I think being fluid in that is how people are going to be successful and jumping on stuff. And I mean, you and I have a very different, I like the comedy aspect. You do a lot of the videos educating. I think we both get a lot of great traction. I'm still trying to, for those listening, I'm trying to get him to dance in one of the videos, just one. But it's a running joke that we have. But and that joke is, again, us connecting on Clubhouse. I do want to talk a little bit about Clubhouse because that has been one of the most powerful, in my opinion, tools of 2021. TikTok came out and people were flooding to it, but then suddenly this little audio app that you had to be invited onto to be able to connect with people. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I have to communicate. I have to talk. It's not just text. Like, it's bringing out all these skills. Talk to me about what Clubhouse is to you and what it's done for your business.
How much more time do we have?
We got 10 minutes if you got it.
I'm just kidding. No,
I'll cut you off.
I literally could talk about this for the rest of the day because honestly, not just professionally, like obviously referrals and the income that's been produced this year in my business as a result has been something that I just could not even wrap my head. I still have trouble wrapping my head around it, right? And the opportunities that I've been awarded have just been phenomenal. I mean, I can't speak to that enough. Yet at the same time, the bigger impact on me is like the new friendships, the new relationships that I've developed on that platform. And because people took time, right? Like we can be doing a million other things while we're on that platform because you can't see us. But at the same time, there's something that's like just super visceral about in the moment as it's happening. Like I now feel like I know you, like I know a lot of my really good friends because of the amount of time that I have no idea where you are or what the other things that you're doing. But at the same time, I can almost guess what's going to come out of your mouth. You know what I mean? Like I know you really, really well now. And for me, that's really interesting because, it's been now 11 months. I joined on January 4th. And
Same
again,
day.
Another day. Another moment, right? That another day I'll never forget. But the reason that's really important to me is I normally set a word of the year. And so legitimately on December 29th, I was like, what is my word of the year? I've got 2 days. Like, what's it going to be? And I thought collaboration. Like, I think most people in our industry think that it's all about competition. It's a dog eat dog world out there. Someone's losing, right? Not that at all. Like there's a reason we call them co-op brokers.
100%.
We're cooperating, right? We're trying to get to the same place together. And so my word was collaboration, and legit 4 or 5, 6 days later, whatever it was, Clubhouse hit, and Matthew Weber, thank God, invited me to it. And from there, I mean, the rest, as they say, is history. But honestly, the personal relationships, like
Yeah.
I can't wait to fly to Vancouver to meet you in person.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
wait to go to LA and meet the people that I've connected with. So like, and again, not just super selfishly for me, just to say thank you for what they've done with me and to me, but also just to be able to like put belly to belly. Like
Yeah.
you and I both know how important that is in this
100%.
business. And there's something that just can't be replaced with that. But from a like a very practical standpoint, I mean, I'll just run it down real quick. My first year in business, I did $2.5 million in volume, 4 units, not much to write home about, but not a bad first year, not
It's
where
not
I
bad.
wanted to be.
You're started.
My second year, I did about 4.5 million. And this year I'm on track to do 10.
Nice.
And I have about $15 million in the pipeline right now, as of this moment, that I can all point directly to Clubhouse referrals.
That's
And
amazing.
so, if you're, it's just like every other social media platform. If you really commit time to it, if you put a strategy behind it, I mean, I've backed off considerably from where I used to be.
Oh,
And
I think we all did.
you just
I
ride the
was,
waves.
I swear to God, there was a moment in time where every one of us were on for like 8 or 9 hours a day. I'm like, oh, Matt's in that room. Oh, like just chatting the whole time. I think we've all curbed it now in a lot of
Right.
ways, and we're very intentional with what rooms we go to now.
Right.
But yeah, I remember those early days.
But it's crazy, right? Like for
Yeah,
that amount of time that we put into it, we all got something out of it, whether it
100%.
was the connection or the friendship or even the masterminding and the marketing and
Yep.
all the great stuff that comes out of it. But at some point, and I know that you and I have talked about this, and there's been lots of rooms and discussions around, great, we've got all this info. What do we do with it now? Like,
Yeah.
how do we execute? How do we implement? And so for me, middle of the year or so, I started going, I'm getting all this great info. I'm getting all this great insight from agents that have been in the business for decades,
Yeah.
and some of them even just for a couple of months, but came from a different industry or
Different
came from a
industry that was
different
relatable.
world. Yeah, the
Yeah.
ways that I would never think about this
Yeah.
business. And
Yeah.
so we got to implement. And so I committed to backing off, and that my time spent on Clubhouse will be very, very strategic. It would be
Yep.
around the people that I like being around,
Yep.
just like going to a party or a bar
100%.
or dinner.
Totally. You
And
see
so
people in
I
that
did
room
that.
and you're like, I like those people, and I know I learned something, or the connection or the motivation. Even sometimes it's like you have that down moment. And we hear it all the time now, the Clubhouse fam. I do consider a lot of these people like family now. Like I go to you guys for that motivation. Just if even if I don't learn something, just the energy just gets you back on track,
It
right?
really
So
does. It really does. Well, even to know, I think too, like on, I don't want to bring the conversation down, but like on the darker side of what we do, like you got to be a little bit of craziness to like do what we do every day,
yeah.
right? And deal with some of the people that we do on both sides of the transaction. And so, for me, a lot of it's just understanding that there are other people out there that are going through the exact same. It's a
Yeah.
very lonely thing, this
Yeah.
entrepreneurship thing, right?
100%.
And your office, your team, like they only do so much for you at
Yep.
the end of the day. And so for me to find like-minded individuals, and like you said, the fam, I feel like, how we all got into the same rooms and into the same conversations just blows my mind.
Yeah.
But I'm eternally grateful for that. And that's something that I will tell my grandkids about for
Totally.
sure, being like, I remember when 2021 came along and I've jumped on this Clubhouse app.
We're all stuck at home, so we had to go out and meet people somehow.
That's right. That's right. It's crazy though. It's amazing though. I love it so much.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you said. I mean, the business aspect, it's fantastic. Yes, we've all done deals through and we've made money, and I think that's the short-term effect, right? That's 100% the short term. It's the collaboration, it's the motivation, it's the family feel that you have now, where you're like, I'm excited to go and talk to these people. And I think in a lot of ways too, I always say it in my room, as everyone who's probably listened, I've talked to about it before, but my mastermind on Tuesdays, I always tell people who are in the crowd, some of them have never come up on stage, and I'm like, listen, as a realtor, communication, how you communicate with people, is the number one thing that's going to make you successful, right? How you talk to people, how you build relations. This is the best app that you can be as a new person, a new agent, or a new entrepreneur. Get up on stage and you can build the skills of talking to people before you go in the field and do it with your clients and other realtors, right? And I mean, there's so many avenues that I think is so phenomenal. And that's why obviously I want to bring it up. And, I've brought it up with several other people. I mean, just even this podcast alone was relaunched because of all the people I met.
Yeah.
I was like, I put a system in place, and I'm like, man, there's all these amazing people that, my audience needs to hear from, because
Mm.
you guys have inspired me, and it's been fantastic. So yeah, if you're not on the app, why not? It's been around for 11 months now. That's all I gotta say to that.
That's true. Well, and that's a really interesting point, right? So no matter what you're there for, like I think again, you have your own strategy, and business people in general, I think understand that when you can get on a social media application that you can get instant input, right? Like Instagram stories, yeah, I can run a poll, yeah, I can get some input. Yeah, there's going to be people's fingers that slips and answers the wrong way. But like if I wanted to, I could go into a room right now and say, "Hey, I've got this great marketing idea. What do you guys think?" Or
Yep.
"Hey, if I drop this link, can you guys go watch this YouTube video and give me your honest feedback?" Like,
Yeah.
where else can you do that? Not many other places, right? And so there's something super interesting about that. But one thing that you just mentioned there, as far as like, I wish Clubhouse was here 3 years ago. Like when I
Yeah.
first started,
Yeah.
you know
100%.
what I mean? I was with KW, and I felt like I got a great experience out of the mentorship program and everything else. But my God, man, you know how much time I had in my first year of real estate? Because I sold the business, I had nothing to do, and I
Yeah.
had 2 clients. Like I would have spent every waking moment on Clubhouse learning. But that, and then the access that you get. I mean, we were just in a YouTube room with Sean Cannell, who is like one of the biggest YouTubers on the face of the planet, much
Yeah.
less on Clubhouse. Like, so for me, it's access to Gary Vaynerchuk, who you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, like being able to get in and tap into some of these conversations. If you're not utilizing it simply for that purpose, I
Mhm.
really am like, what? Do you think this is like a fad? Is this going away? Like, you're crazy.
You know what? And again, even if it is a fad, take what you can get out of it until the time when it goes away. It's just like any other social
Mm,
platform, right?
yep.
Again, you're building a brand on rented land, but take what you can get and build that audience, and then find a way. I mean, all of us now are cross-platform. We're not just following each other on Clubhouse. You see my Instagram, I see yours. I see your TikToks, you see mine, right? So
Yep.
we're now, we've built an audience that's broader than just the app. And even now we're face to face on this Zoom, right? It's because it's built that relationship.
Mm,
And I mean, yeah, if I said it once in my room, what you are getting in an hour of Clubhouse is tens of thousands of dollars in free coaching,
correct.
right? Because these guys are giving away some of their best knowledge for nothing, just because they're part of the group, they're on there, and someone asks them and they're answering it. You go to anywhere else and you say, I want to learn this from you, they're going to say percentage of your commission, or sign up for my coaching program, it's 10 grand a year. Right? Like,
Right.
so you do get access is the key thing, and it's literally just an investment of time. Then of course, from there, and if you're new in the business and you're listening to this, that investment of time then needs to be, once you've learned or you've heard and you've written your notes, you need to implement, right? I mean, it's so many agents come and say, how did you do this? I'm like, remember when so and so said this? I did exactly what he said, and it landed me a listing or a buyer or whatever. Why didn't you do that?
Yeah.
Right? So you got to implement, and that's like any coaching program. So
Yeah, 100%. Well, and the accountability that comes as a result, right? Like,
mhm.
and you and I have, bantered about this in the past, but honestly, like there is something to be said about the challenges and the
Mhm.
things happening on that platform that bleed into the other social media platforms.
Yeah.
So, there was a YouTube challenge going on for about a month, and there's been Instagram and TikTok challenges. So, I think honestly, the accountability, because like you said, none of this means anything until we start implementing.
Mhm.
But to then have the accountability, and I know that if I don't see your story for a week, I'm calling you or I'm
Exactly.
DMing you going, dude, is everything okay? Like, are
Yeah.
you all right?
uh you're missing your post, what's going on?
Yeah, right. But anyway, no, I could not agree more. I think a lot of people thought it was a fad, but your point about like the skill set or whatever you learn from this one platform, just like with Snapchat, like you were telling stories daily there.
Yeah.
You could do that on Instagram. You used to
Yep.
be able to do it on LinkedIn. You can now do it, in a lot of different ways. But even on Clubhouse, if I were going to build the perfect brokerage, it would be you have to be a solid communicator
Mhm.
and you have to really understand media because
Yeah.
that's where the attention is, right? I don't care what
100%.
you're selling. If you don't have my attention, you can't sell me. And so I would be just hyper focused on communicators. And to your point, even as a new agent, you still know stuff. And that's
Mhm.
why for the first like 30 or 45 days, all I heard people talking about was adding value, adding value, adding value, to the point I was like, don't add value. Just tell me what your perspective is.
Yeah.
How does this hit you? How do you
Yep.
feel about this? Because that to me is valuable. I don't care if you produce $1 million or $101 million or $1
Yeah.
billion in real estate. I want
Yep.
to know how this hits you. Like, do you like it or do you not? Because at the end of the day, you're a consumer too. And to me,
Yep.
that's what I want to know. And that's what I want to understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're getting the end of time here. I respect your time and want to make sure you got you're busy out there and you're ramping up and all these things. There's one thing I do with all of my guests, and I heard it on another podcast once, and I really liked it, so I pulled it in here. Is because we're all educating, we're always getting educated. What is that one book that you read, whether it's recently or in the past, that has been the most impactful for you, whether it's life, business, whatever? What would be that one book you would say, if you're going to pick one, go and read this one?
100%. I mean, I always go back to The Psychology of Winning. For me, when I listened to that book on audio tape, this is long before Audible or anything else, but I found it, and legitimately I found it in an abandoned house. I was working I was working a job where we would do asbestos and lead removal, and I was a consultant on that website, on that site rather, as a supervisor. And so the guys would go in and they'd remove this stuff. And I worked for an engineering firm, and we went into an abandoned house that they were about to tear down and build a new subdivision. And the house had asbestos in it, so we were about to tear it down. And this guy must have gotten so much money that he basically left everything. I mean, he didn't even pack clothes. Like, the
Jesus.
closets were still, he got so much money, he literally just walked away from that. The car was still in the driveway. So anyway, long story short, I was walking through that house before we were demoing it, and I found The Psychology of Winning on audio tape, and I had 6 or 8 tapes or whatever. And I had it, and I grabbed it, and I started playing it, and I started listening to it. And for me professionally, that was a very, very dark time. I was
Mhm.
not happy doing what I was doing. My other business had just failed. I was in a very dark personal spot.
Right.
And that book, honest to God, Cam, like, lifted me out of the mire, so to speak,
Yeah.
and put me in a place that I changed literally my mindset around life in general, not just business, not just work, not just the ethical component of any of this, but I mean, legitimately changed my entire life trajectory. And so
Right.
if you're only going to read one book between now and the time you die, The Psychology of Winning will absolutely change your life.
I appreciate that. I've definitely written that one down. I'll be looking it up myself. I always try to, when the guests tell me if it's a book I haven't read, I'm like, oh, I gotta definitely pull that one up. I'm a big fan of doing it on the audiobooks. It's funny that you said you found like 6 tapes. For the younger listeners, that's what we used to have to listen to. We couldn't just download it on our phone. We'd actually have to like put these like little plastic things in with these the music in it. And yeah, I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, and you
Anyways,
had to use the pencil to
the
rewind it.
pencil. Yeah, yeah, we're both there. All right, but anyways, Matt, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you so much, and I always look forward whenever I see you jump in a room of mine, or vice versa. I jump in, I say, I'm like, hey, there's Matt. I always know it's going to be a great conversation. I think we had an awesome conversation here. I hope you guys listening took some notes, because he gave some great advice out there. So go back, re-listen to this podcast again, and check Matt out. What's the best way someone can reach you online? Where's the best spot to go?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to my website, it's got all the socials and everything connected there. It's just mattlamarsh.com.
There we
And
go.
it's nothing super pretty as far as IDX feeds or anything. Like, it's more about just me, who I am, what I do. It's got all the real estate stuff there as well, but like, it's really just like the catch-all, I call it,
Yeah.
for you to kind of be brought into my ecosystem. And I just can't say thank you enough to you. I really appreciate your friendship. I definitely do consider us great friends.
I do too.
And I appreciate your time today as well. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. And thank you again. And folks, for listening, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys coming back, listening to this awesome episode. If you really enjoyed it, give us a rating, throw a 5-star out there. I always appreciate seeing those, and throw some comments too on especially on Apple. I love seeing what you guys are saying about it. And go check Matt out. Go to mattlamarsh.com, check him out. You find his socials, whether you're on TikTok or Instagram, he is there. And Matt, I appreciate it so much. We'll catch you on Clubhouse very soon. And I can't wait to put this episode out.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks again, everyone.